Crystal Bentley. They will be followed by Patricia Virgil, Audrey Simpson, David Statt, and Justin Dunn.
Madam Chair.
Senator,
just while we get the next one around, just a quick observation.
Sure.
When we take them up, and I don't know what the criteria is, but it seems to me that not everybody or anybody can be a nurse. Not anybody can be a pilot. Is there some type of personality test or is there some type of criteria that is used to, or you don't accept all applicants who want to be field workers, something that shows that they don't have the kind of ability or character or personality to do this type of issue. It's an observation that we're listening to.
That's a good observation, yeah. I'll bet you're Mr. Senator. Sorry. Representative Dutton. Stays the same, yes. Yes.
I was going to ask you a question real quickly. Do we know whether or not the Sunset Commission staff heard any of these complaints about CPS?
I don't know the answer to that. Hello. Can I ask you all, just, will you identify yourself, please, for the record?
For the record, my name is Amy Tripp with Sunset Staff.
Representative Dutton was asking during the process if you heard any of those complaints that were here.
We did. We actually got some responses to our report, and during the review as well, from some of the city folks and some of the ones as well.
Okay. Did that? Yeah.
Sure.
That didn't make it into y'all's report at all, and I'm wondering why.
Well, because what we were looking at is if the agency had an avenue for complaints, and they do, and we weren't really sure how to improve that. Because that's what we can fix, is making sure there's a process for those things. But we can't address individual cases.
Oh, I'm not suggesting that. I guess I was wondering who's protecting our children from Children's Protective Services? I mean, and if the process doesn't work, I mean, I assume you all evaluate this process to see whether it worked or not.
The complaints process?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, what we were looking for was, is the agency getting the word out about it? They had an 800 number. We looked at the time that it takes to process complaints, and we didn't identify any issues specifically.
You didn't look at any resolutions of the complaints to determine whether or not the system allowed full exposure to complainants such that you could now evaluate whether or not the system works.
We didn't get into evaluating individual complaints and trying to kind of second guess what the agency was doing. We just couldn't get that far down in detail.
Well, having been here last session when we took a look at the State Judicial Commission, for example, one of the things we did is we didn't just look at whether they had a complaint system. We looked at the results and whether or not that complaint system, of that system, and whether or not it accomplished. Because the system wasn't designed just for reporting. I mean, it's designed to remedy the problem. And maybe the process works, but the process can only work if it results in a remedy to whatever the problem that's been alleged. And I don't mean evaluating each complaint, no, that's not what I'm getting at. But even if you did just a sampling of the complaints to determine whether the process works the way we intend for it to work.
Madam Chair?
And I guess we didn't do any of that.
We looked basically at their complaints process to make sure that they had an
avenue.
Yeah.
Okay.
But we didn't get down to that level.
All right. Okay. All right. Thanks. Thanks, Madam Chair.
You'll get your chance. Thank you. Mr. Am I saying this right?
Order is the easy way, but it's Erder, the other side.
Erder.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes, my name is Chad, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak before the committee.
Would you pull that microphone up so we can get you on record and hear you? Thank you. Thank you.
I first accidentally stumbled into the work in 1975 at a treatment center, and in 1988 I founded a child policing agency, of which I'm still the director. And the first thing I want to tell the committee is that my experience with the department is that by and large, the overwhelming majority of people that work there are dedicated, hardworking, and trying to do their best. I don't think the problem with the department is the people. I think the main problem is the culture and the protocols that they have to follow. Most people who decide to devote their life to working with kids want to do that. People at the department, unfortunately, are forced to really consider policy and protocol. One of the things we never talk about is service to kids. How do we protect kids? How do we provide service to these kids so they can succeed and become successful adults? Very little of that is talked about. It's about the policy and the protocol. And caseworkers are often forced to follow policy when they know it's not in the best interest of kids. And I will say to the department, there's one policy that they need to follow, just one. What is in the best interest of each individual kid. It's that simple. As a result, the department, first of all, is not able to adequately monitor us, private agencies. They don't make the distinction who are quality agencies and who are substandard. They don't do that. Okay. Substandard agencies continue to be substandard. One of the departments that is actually, I think, very good within the department is licensing. Licensing monitor us, but they're only one arm of three. Our biggest problem is with the case management, CPS. They don't do case management effectively because they have to follow policy. Plus, the public is paying for two sets of case management services, us and the department. Why do that? If you need an electrical problem fixed at your home, why would you hire two electricians? Choose one or choose the other. Don't do both. But fundamentally, my time is almost up. Redesign simply cements the current dysfunctional department. It does nothing to reform the system. It is the same system, and all the independent administrator does is takes money that's allocated for services to kids and gives it to an independent administrator to protect the department from having to change. I say all they need to do is look and change. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Order. Ashley Harris.
Good afternoon. My name is Ashley Harris with Texans Care for Children. As a former CPS caseworker, I can't help but I'm inclined to change my testimony, but I won't. But I'd be happy to follow up with offices to discuss the complaint process and other workforce issues. But for today, I want to talk about the recommendation to move the Pregnant and Postpartum Intervention Program and the Parenting Awareness and Drug Risk Education Program to DFPS. We do not support this move for a couple of reasons, in part due to Sunset's criticism of the department's current prevention efforts, and in part due to feedback we have received from DFPS, DISHES, consumers, and other treatment providers as facilitator of a year-long stakeholder group. I actually worked with Catherine Brias on this, working on the intersection of substance use and child welfare involvement. I've provided written testimony to talk about all of our concerns, but I'm just going to go over a couple. In detail, the Sunset Report highlights weaknesses in the department's current prevention efforts, including the department's lack of prioritization for such programs. As mentioned in the report, DFPS has lacked a unified, consistent strategy for prevention services. Its inadequate use of data to inform its decisions and demonstrate outcomes to the legislature and the public, and its historic emphasis on prevention as a contracting function rather than as a true program within DFPS. These challenges will be further exacerbated by additional programming not previously managed by DFPS. Sunset staff go on to say that prevention has long suffered from a lack of prioritization within the agency. Conversely, under DISHES, substance abuse prevention in Texas has witnessed expansion and increased funding at the state level and remains a priority for DISHES. With its more extensive experience handling state and federal funding contracts, they remain better suited to maximize funding opportunities and ensure the stability of the state's efforts to support families who are impacted by substance abuse. Lastly, the Department of Family Protective Services leaders at the departments state they are not the experts in treatment, recovery, and effective programming for individuals with substance abuse issues. And they don't feel like they're best positioned to appropriately lead these statewide efforts and support families struggling with substance abuse and also co-occurring mental health disorders. To wrap it all up, given the Sunset's comprehensive and critical review of the department's current prevention efforts, the Sunset's call to pause many DFPS initiatives, it would be reasonable and most beneficial to keep PPI and Padre at the Department of State Health Services. Thank you so much for your time, and again, given my previous experience at the department and now policy work, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have and follow up with all of your offices.
Thank you. Ashley, thanks for your testimony. I'm sure some members will take you up on that.
Thank you.
Next, Catherine Burgess.
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Catherine Brias, and I'm Director of Child Welfare Policy at One Voice, Texas. I have extensive experience in the areas of privatization and prevention in particular. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today and to the Sunset staff for their really hard work. The first issue area I want to bring to your attention is redesign. One Voice Texas is in full support of the recommendation that redesign not move forward until DFPS has conducted a thorough evaluation of current problems and established a clear plan for future implementation efforts. In particular, the focus should be on the financial burden to the single-source continuum contractor, such as the serious deficit that Providence Service Corporation currently faces. Second, a lack of a process evaluation which allows us to understand why we see the outcomes we see. And third, a plan to address needed changes within the current legacy system, as research has shown us that privatization efforts are only as strong as the state agency which implements and monitors them. The second area I would like to highlight is the recommendation to transfer prevention programs from HHSC and DSHS to PEI. We strongly disagree with this recommendation. As Ashley pointed out, Sunset staff clearly indicate in their report that PEI has been chronically underfunded without strategic direction and lacking clear outcomes by which impact can be measured. The report states that DFPS has not yet demonstrated the level of commitment needed. History also supports this fact, as DFPS has consistently placed prevention at the bottom of their exceptional item list. Therefore, at this time, it does not appear prudent to add to the responsibilities of PEI when there are actually numerous current statutory responsibilities which they have been unable to meet. At a minimum, the legislature should certainly support the strategic planning and outcome development recommendations contained in the report. However, this commission has an opportunity to structure prevention at the state level so that efficient and effective coordination, which were highlighted as important goals by the 1998 Sunset Commission and the creation of the HHSC enterprise, can be realized. Given that more than once the Sunset report highlights that child maltreatment is a symptom of larger social issues, it's necessary to recognize that prevention and early intervention efforts are not clearly the responsibility of PEI, but rather span several state agencies that deal with mental health, substance abuse, domestic violence, and healthcare. Therefore, One Voice Texas recommends that the Sunset Commission consider restructuring prevention at the state level so it is an agency under HHSC rather than one contract division under PEI or directly under the DFPS Commissioner. And in my written testimony, I outline a model for you to consider. Thank you for your time. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have, and as Ashley said, we can certainly meet with your office because we have several recommendations around the internal complaint process.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Okay. Crystal Bent.
Hello, how are you doing today? My name is Crystal Bentley, but I would also like to let everybody in here know that I am also a sinner. So I do not do everything correctly in my life, but what I'm saying is going to be very unpopular, and I don't care about being politically correct. So there's a system in place that we have. It is not working. I was abused as a child growing up in foster care, and there are several other people in here who were abused as a child growing up in the system. And people have shoved medication down our throats. People have beat us. They have tried everything to mold us into adults that are productive in this world. But instead, we grow up being statistics. We grow up with labels on our heads. And the only thing that no one will shove down our throat is that Jesus is the answer to all of our problems. The United States was built on the foundation that we were a nation under God, but He has been taken out of everything, every single thing, and has been been replaced with homosexuality, has been replaced with so many things. You know, people are trying to make it okay for them to do whatever they want. And they turn out and they do them to our children. And we have no real idea what we are doing to our future. 10 years ago, I'm the future right now. I'm the current future. My children are the future. And what are we teaching our kids that are in foster care? We're teaching them how to grow up and kill people. We're teaching them how to grow up and abuse people because that's what's being done to us. Me, personally, I grew to have a relationship with the Lord, and I'm a very productive citizen. I have my children. They're with me. They're safe. We have a great life. And it's because I gave my life to Christ, and it was somebody along the way who told me about him. And nobody is telling our youth today about Jesus Christ. And I think that's bullcrap. I really do. Because he's free. No one has to negotiate about how much money it's going to cost, because what he offers is very free. No charge at all. And I think that if America was the country that it is, and if CPS was the organization that it is, that they would acknowledge him and seek him for to raise our kids the way they should go. And I've said this before, if you train a child the way they should go, they will not depart from it. And also, biblically speaking, the Bible says not to take advantage of orphans, and he looks out for us because we don't have people to guide us, and it is our duty as human beings, as people, to fight for justice of people who are fatherless. That's what the Word of God says. And to not conform to this world, because if we conform to this world, continue to conform to this world, we're going to continue to have the same thing happen over and over again. The cycle is going to continue. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Ms. Bentley. Appreciate your testimony. All right, next panel we have coming up. Patricia Virgil, Audra Simpson, David Stott, and Dustin Dunn. And then the four behind them, if you want to come sit up at the front, would be Tyrone Obaseki, Josette Saxton, Debbie Salinas, and Susie Flores. All right, which one is Patricia? Patricia, okay. Please state your name and begin your testimony.
Hello, my name is Patricia Ann Virgil. I am a representative of Brave. I am a former foster youth. I was in CPS from the age of 12 to 19. Over the course of the years, I was in several foster homes and one shelter. The day I came into foster care, I was taken to a shelter, me, my brother, and my sister. And we were by transport, and we were just dropped off without speaking to a caseworker, finding out if we were okay, if we need anything. And we stayed there for like a month and a couple of days. And at the shelter, I was choked until I passed out by another youth. And then I was kicked until I woke up by a staff member while my sister watched. At the age of 14, I was placed on several high-dose medications for bipolar, ADHD, post-traumatic stress, depression, and one that was for Parkinson's disease, because I was shaking so much from being over-medicated. I was asked how the medicine was treating me, and when I said it didn't feel right, the dose was increased and or more was added on. Eventually, I stopped telling the truth because I was afraid. I was also sexually assaulted by a foster parent. When I tried to speak up about it, it resulted in I was a liar. I was asking for it. I was wearing provocative clothing. I was asking him to touch me and kiss all over me. I felt like I had no voice and I was supposed to let it happen and not speak up about anything. I was 12 years old. In care, I felt like I was better off living with my mother and my stepfather, who abused me physically, sexually, verbally, and emotionally. In general, I think CPS would be better if they didn't over-medicate the children and let them have a voice about how they feel. I also feel that caseworkers should come in and talk to the children and truly care about them and their safety. I also feel that foster parents should go through the same screenings as one would go through to adopt a child each time they get a new foster child.
Thank you. It takes a lot of courage to testify, and I appreciate your time this morning. Audra Simpson.
Hi, my name is Audra Simpson. I'm a wife, a mother, and an active member of both my church and my community. I have a degree in aerospace engineering and a pilot's license, but I've been fortunate enough to spend the last 5 years doing what I'm most passionate about, and that is advocating for children and those in need. I'm a CASA worker. I work with youth who have aged out of the foster care system in the Angel Reach program, and I work with some international ministries as well. Prior to my work as a CASA, I was extremely naive to the issues that children in the custody of the state were facing. What I have experienced is this: caseworkers who couldn't possibly manage the caseloads they have, and therefore tend to focus on putting out fires. Supervisors with the same problems. Attorneys who rarely talk or visit the children they are representing, and children who end up paying the price for these things. I have yet to be on a case in which the caseworker remains the same for the duration of the case. I've been on several cases where the same is true for the case supervisors. I've seen children unnecessarily left in foster care for months because the attorneys could not fit a hearing into their vacation schedules. I've twice seen newborn babies born with drugs in their system being placed in foster homes where both parents were working, sending very small newborns still suffering from withdrawals to a daycare every day. Ironically, both of these newborns had family placement options, but it took months to get them moved. Although I do not consider myself an emotional person, I have walked out of a hearing in tears at the decisions that are made for the so-called best interest of a child. I have been sad, I have been angry, and I have been simply appalled at some of the things that happen at the hands of well-intentioned, well-educated people, while the children seem to get dragged behind in the wake. Despite all the shortcomings for our children currently in the system, by far the biggest heartbreak for me is working with youth who have aged out of the system, some of whom you've just heard from. As a society, our tendency, upon seeing the statistics, is to judge these youth and criticize them for not making better choices. But it's apparent after investing any amount of time in these youth that they simply lack direction, and most importantly, someone, anyone, to love them, care about them, and teach them how to make good choices, and to tell them that it isn't okay for the way that they've been treated and the things that they've been through. And it's simply amazing to see the changes that occur once they have a mentor in their lives who provide these things. Not perfect still, but substantially better. While I agree with many of the current recommendations to make CPS more efficient, I think we have to focus more on children who are in care. Every child needs a champion, every child deserves a champion, and I believe the statistics would be far better if every child had a champion. We have seen mentoring programs work wonderfully in Angel Reach as well as the Kairos program, and have had them recommended to our own CPS caseworkers. We have churches and communities full of people willing to mentor kids if they're allowed, and I hope that you guys will consider looking into that. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Mr. Stott.
Thank you very much. David Stott is my name. I am a volunteer with the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, and I'm also a volunteer with Angel Reach, working with Time Dog foster youth. And it's interesting. We have on one hand here men and women who have committed a crime and against others, and we have on the other children who a crime has been committed against. In my experience in working with both, there's a common denominator here, and that is neither one had a good, strong role model in their life when they needed it, when they were young. So what I'm recommending, and it's addressing issue number one around mentoring, I think the mentoring recommendations are excellent. I don't think they go far enough. I believe the children and the foster families need that mentoring also. Just a little bit in my experience with TDCJ, we do mentoring with men, especially ones who are getting ready to get out. And what we do with them is we spend a lot of time talking with them about their concerns about getting out, what they need to do to prepare. We help them with resumes. We help them with a life plan. We help them talk through all these things that they're going to have to face when they get out. And when they do get out, we spend time with them. I have 3 that two that are out, and I talk with them on a regular basis. So the mentoring continues on for beyond that. I believe the model, and TDCJ sees the value for this effort, and they're expanding their use of volunteers in that effort. And some of the results of that have been a reduction in recidivism rate, more success in their life, jobs, and so on and so forth. So what I'm suggesting is that the Child Protective Service look at a mentoring program for the children, for the families. TDCJ has a real good model, and I'd be happy to hook you up with the right people to talk about that in more detail. There are also a lot of other sources for volunteers. The state, based on the Corporation National Community Service Survey, there are 24% of Texans volunteer for something. Okay, so we have a giving state. Out of that 24%, 40% of those people are tutoring and teaching. So there's an opportunity there. So I guess in wrapping this whole thing up, in the short time I have, the foster children and the caseworkers have three things in common. First, they're in a stressful environment. Secondly, they have poor supervision. And thirdly, the pay is lousy. That's my comment.
Really appreciate your testimony. Thanks for your volunteer work with TDCJ and well. Dustin Dunn.
I'm Dustin Dunn. I'm a part of Groups now.
Dustin, will you pull that mic a little closer to your mouth so we can hear your testimony? That's better. Thank you.
Okay. I was in foster care from the time I was 13 to the time I was 18. And when I first got into foster care, they started putting me on all kinds of medications. I was pretty much a zombie for most of my time there. But then as I started to get older and they started to take me off of some of the medications, I started realizing why they did it. It's because the more, medications and everything else you're on, the higher your level of care, the more they get paid. And realizing that, most foster parents don't care about who you are or what you're doing. They care about the check that comes in every month. They just want to either bring in, and if you don't follow what they say, they move you along. But it's just hard to see. I mean, it's hard to go to high school like that because you go in and you're just a zombie. You don't have any friends. You don't want to make any friends. And it's very hard growing up like that. And seeing that, actually seeing a way to fix that. The way that they have it is, like I said, the higher the level of care, the more the pay. I say we flip that around as incentive pay. The lower the level of care, the more you receive for that, because you've gotten the child to stabilize, and they're working better and functioning more, and they're not all doped up all the time on medications that aren't necessary. That's all.
Thank you, Justin. Appreciate your testimony. Thank you all very much. Next panel, Tyrone Obaseki, Josette Saxton, Debbie Salinas, and Susie Flores. I may be mispronouncing that last name.
It's perfectly fine. It's not the focal point. The main word today.
Would you go ahead and say your name just for a record, please?
My name is Tyrone Obaseki. I am the co-founder of Brave, and I am a mental health clinician at Angel Reach, a nonprofit transitional home in Conroe, Texas. The key word today is paradigm shift. That's what we need to focus on. Several people have provided solutions. I have solutions available, but the main thing that we need to transition from is this institutionalized model that is aiding in the mental paralysis of our young people. This is America. This is the great state of Texas. And I am appalled to have worked for the agency, to look in my DFPS, case file, and see that not only was I labeled mentally retarded, but I also was labeled bipolar, schizophrenic, learning disabled, and emotionally disturbed. How is that possible? How is that possible for somebody to go from mentally retarded to a motivational speaker and clinician? That must change today. Because if we want to address the issue of young people who aren't going to college, the amount of young people who are coming out and being dependent on the system, we need to be able to stop labeling them. Speak things that be not as though they were, instead of creating an environment conducive to their mental downfall. Things are going on in the system that many people do not want to talk about, and that's fraud. That's exactly what this is. In my DFPA's case file, it shows that nobody wanted to talk about the restraints. Nobody wanted to address the fact that I was sexually abused. Nobody wanted to address the fact that I stayed in an RTC for 9 years. Change the environment. Changing this culture also means that we need to engage the faith-based community. I'm a man of God. I'm heterosexual, despite the system's lack to provide me with a consistent male role model. And that's what needs to take place. Either we can go ahead and sit here and act like boo-boo the fool, like we don't know what's going on, or we can take a stand today for every young person in America who is looking to you for those answers. America the Beautiful. All right.
Thank you very much for that testimony. Josette Saxton.
Hi, good afternoon, or is it still good morning? I'm Josette Saxton, Texans Care for Children. I cover mental health policy, but I'm here today to speak to the DFPS staff report, largely around issue 6, or I should say solely on issue 6, which addresses prevention and early intervention. Mental health stakeholders were looking to the DSH's staff report to look for, well, what's going on about mental health prevention, and there's nothing there. The one place that we do see prevention being addressed within the HHS staff reports were in DFPS, really looking at it through the child welfare, child abuse, and neglect lens. I will have to say I'm very thankful for that, and I support the recommendation that the state needs to elevate prevention and early intervention, and it needs to do a better job of tracking outcomes and telling the story of the impact that these programs have. What I do say is, what I do not agree with is that the legislature has endorsed Department of Family and Protective Services as being the primary prevention agency. I think that is a de facto response based on a lack of really thoughtful or strategic planning on how we as a state address prevention and early intervention across systems. Because if you look at it, we have mental health, the various prevention is being funded across agencies. We have mental health prevention, substance abuse prevention, delinquency, dropout rate prevention. All of these are siloed in different agencies, but yet they're all largely addressing the common root problems. A lot of the interventions that are effective at addressing these issues target common protective factors and common risk factors. But yes, when we're looking at them, we're just looking at them in discrete silos. These problems don't happen in discrete silos. Often they are co-occurring, and I think the state can do a better job of effectively and efficiently promoting healthy child and youth development and successful kids if we take the opportunity to do a strategic, thoughtful look at how we address prevention in the state. I should probably just say what Dr. Catherine Bareilles with One Voice said, ditto that. In terms of her recommendation about using this process, the sunset process, to take a broader look at how we as a state address prevention and early intervention. Specific recommendations. One, I would say home visiting, I mentioned, is a perfect example of an intervention that addresses a broad range of outcomes. It's just not about child abuse and neglect. It also produces outcomes related to school readiness, child development, child safety, even delinquency issues. So again, don't just put it within a child abuse and neglect agency. Prevention and early interventions should be elevated across all agencies, again, not just DFPS. Strategic planning relating to prevention and early intervention needs to occur across all agencies, and better measuring of outcomes so that we could best understand the impact that we are getting. Right now, if we are using these interventions and we're just measuring, well, what are the abuse and neglect rates, but we're not capturing how is that programming helping kids stay in school, helping kids not get involved in substance use or in delinquent behaviors, we're missing the true impact of the dollars that we're spending. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Saxton. Appreciate your testimony. Debbie Salinas.
Is that Debbie Salinas Valdez?
Valdez, okay. Sorry about that.
Okay.
And I was also going to ask you, did you fill out a witness affirmation form?
I did.
I thought you must have because you're on our list, but I don't see the actual form. We may need to get you to fill out another one.
Yes, sir. I'll be happy to do
Okay.
another one.
We'll go ahead and take your testimony right now.
My name is Debbie Salinas Valdez. I'm a disability rights advocate. I'm a parent of a young adult with disabilities. I'm also a member of the Guardianship Reform Advocates for the Disabled and the Elderly. What you're hearing today from these children that are being abused by the system is also happening to the disabled. And it seems that we have created a system of no protections because many individuals are going into the guardianship system. And that leaves the protections for them by one individual, which is your probate judge, who has stripped you of every civil right you have because you are a ward of the state and under guardianship. And he's the only one who has the authority to protect you. We have created a guardianship industry in the state of Texas that we are all going to become victimized by. In the future, I have addressed my concerns with several people with the Department of Aging and Disability Services and also with the Department of Family and Protective Services for many years now, because we have seen this trend, a growing trend. Our elderly and our disabled are also being treated the same way as the children, except for we have a judicial process that no one, no family member can afford to protect their loved one under a guardianship that is where services is provided from a local guardianship program, a private professional guardian, a certified guardian in the state of Texas. This is going to be a very serious problem because they are preparing for the baby boomers, all right? And that includes me. I started this when I realized parents were losing their guardianship and losing their children only to grant these individuals, vulnerable individuals, to these guardianship programs. And when I realized I could lose my daughter, my only one daughter, under this circumstance, then I now realize that this is not just about her. This is about my future as well. Because we've got an industry out there that what we've done is we're taking people from the human services system and putting them into a judicial system. And they are being abused and neglected, over-medicated, isolated, and then not only that, but their estates are being robbed by the court-appointed protectors. And I think it's a time that we should probably take a legislative, this should be a legislative emergency that we stop APS and DADS from making any more referrals to these probate courts without them completing a thorough investigation prior to substantiate abuse, neglect, or exploitation before they refer these cases over to the courts, because that is not happening.
Thank you, Ms. Valdez.
Thank you.
I recognize Representative Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My comment is for Tyrone. Thank you for being here. I'm reading over your testimony. Problem number 4, and you have a solution that the state legislatures and people of leadership should visit and tour these facilities.
Yes, sir.
I'm with you 100%.
Let's do it.
I'm with you 100%.
Is that the reason? Sorry.
No, my staff and I have toured several facilities because I want to understand the people behind the line item.
Yes, sir.
And I want to understand the families that are there. My wife has made her entire career dealing with people with special needs. And so I understand what that is, but I'm looking even deeper into visiting these facilities. Mr. Luce and I have talked about this before. I'm with you. We're trying to coordinate an effort that will get the members of this body to tour more of these facilities.
Yes,
because you have to see the people that service, and you have to see the people that are being serviced. And so I'm with you. So if you can find my staff at some point,
okay,
we're going to talk about how we can make that one a reality.
I'm proud to do that.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Ms. Valdez, I guess they have already provided you another form to
Yes, sir, they have.
complete.
I'm
Thank
filling
you.
it out right now.
I appreciate you filling that out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Susie Flores.
Hi, on behalf of Parental Rights, we want to thank each and every one of you to giving us the opportunity to testify. As you know, today there are 2,899 children who have died while in the custody of Child Protective Services, foster homes, and state agency, an increase of 177 children more. There are 29,775 children lingering in Child Protective Services. More are added each day based on CPS workers' lives to the already 29,775. I have gone over the review and just the address of foster care alone is not, there's more to that that needs to be addressed. One is the safety plan. When a parent completes a safety plan, there is no guarantee that the child will be returned back to the parents. The anonymous call is another tool that has been brought about harm to families and children. It is easy for a vindictive person to cause harm by bringing false accusations. CPS workers do not respect parental rights, and this issue needs to be addressed. I cannot understand how and why CPS continues to exist, how our own legislatures and government have allowed CPS to push around children and families. The existence of CPS is not in the best interest of our children, nor our families. When do we as citizens, professionals, senators, judges, lawyers, police, state representatives stand up and put an end to CPS? How many more lives will it take? How many more children? According to DFPS stats, it is very obvious that understaffed and funding is not the problem. Reform does not cut a child's death. It is a proven fact that throughout the years that staff nor funding will positively impact CPS, our children and families. CPS has felt our children and families, the state as a whole, with more children dying each year. It's time for change, and it's time to close CPS. Yes. Thank you for your time and considering the consideration given. Our families and children need your help so desperately. We need to stop CPS from killing our children and families. If Med was abolished because of corruption, which is also happening in CPS, that includes the death of many children and families, then the same action should be taken against Child Protective Services. I have also given you several packets that include stats of death of children, and like I said, we're up to 2,899 children in Texas alone, and we added 177 more this year.
Thank you, Ms. Flores. Thank all of you for your testimony. We really appreciate you taking time out of your day to come here. So thank you. Next panel, we'll have